Good Tvach. I will tell you that I think that people who tend to take a look and try to pay attention to society at large will tell you that there are certain trends that you can see within society that infects how people think. Right? Politically, you see this all the time. Right? Go back 5 years ago, Black Lives Matter was the thing, right? Now, nobody could care less. Right? Now it's more like Hamas. Right? And you see the same thing in education, it's the same way. There are certain trends that you see that change over time. That's sort of people at large tend to change how they think. I think that the same thing is true when it comes to from society. From society, I think, I've kind of tried to pull a lens back a little bit, and while I don't have great research on this to prove what I'm about to say is true, we'll see if you agree or disagree with me. 15, 20, 25 years ago, really hot topic in Judaism was Lashon Hara. Right? Wherever you look, people are talking about Lashon Hara, Machzam Lefi, different shiurim about it. Nowadays, and this is probably true, I'd say, for about the last 5-10 years, Bitachon has become the topic everybody wants to talk about. Amazon had 18 different books on Bitachon, right? If I were to ask you, name a bestseller on the ArtScroll bestseller list, ArtScroll has its own bestseller list, I doubt any of you would realize that the English Beis Halevi on Bitachon is an ArtScroll bestseller. Everyone wants to talk about Bitachon. Now, I think the reason for that actually is pretty straightforward. The world is nuts. Everyone wants to figure out a way how they can actually find a way to stay calm, to stay centered, to find that port in the storm that will help them get through life. And so if you're a frum person, the concept of Bitachon, besides the fact that it's basically the reason we're on this planet, but it gives you something to sort of hold on to try to find that measure of calmness in your life. Now, truth is, this is not only true in the frum community. I think if you were to go outside into the non-Jewish world, you'll actually notice the same thing, right? One of the biggest corporate buzzwords, a little bit before DEI became popular, was mindfulness. Everyone wants to talk about being mindful. Why? Because if you're mindful, you're present, it helps keep you calm, which is also the name of a very popular app. Right? Everyone wants to stay calm. So we're all looking for the same thing. So this is something that Bitachon gives you because it can help you have a certain level of Menuchas Hanefesh. And whether you realize it consciously or not, the truth is that pretty much everybody knows that living a life of Menuchas Hanefesh is a better way to live. Right? I think all of us want to be, or think we are, that really calm person who is very calm, under pressure. When my oldest was born, to say it bluntly, I was a total wreck. I was just we're in the hospital and my wife's doctor wasn't there, so we had somebody else who was on call, and I'm kind of freaking out. And we learned, one of the things you learn when you're a young married man is when your wife's expecting, you go to learn how to do the breathing exercises. Right? Anyone did this, right? I had no clue what was going on. My wife's in labor. I'm trying to tell her to breathe. She looks at me like I'm crazy. What are you doing? And I'm a total wreck. Okay. When my daughter was born a couple years later, so I'm I'm going to be under control. And my wife's doctor was there. And we're in the room trying really hard to stay under control. And he looks around and he says, we don't have a nurse to help us. And this set me off. I'm totally now I'm freaking out again. And he was like, no, it's okay. It'll be fine. I've done this before. No issues. And that just had this incredibly calming effect on me. And I was like, okay, everything's going to be fine. We all want to be that person. Have a level of Menuchas Hanefesh, live our life calmly, and feel like, okay, I'm under control in my life. Great. How exactly am I supposed to do that? So you'll tell me, Bitachon, right? That's what Bitachon is for. Right? Amazon, 18 different books on Bitachon. Learn Bitachon and you will find that sense of Menuchas Hanefesh that you're looking for in your life. Except, I don't want to speak for anybody else in the room, but speaking for myself, sometimes Bitachon just doesn't quite get you where you need to be in terms of that feeling of calmness, that feeling of Menuchas Hanefesh. Like sometimes bitachon is just not enough. And then you start to go through this guilt pattern, right? Where you feel like, okay, so I should have more bitachon, I don't, I feel guilty, I don't feel good anymore, now I feel worse, I should have more bitachon, I beat myself up over it, and it goes on and on and on. And instead of actually being able to feel more calm, you feel worse, because now you feel worked up and guilty. And what exactly are you supposed to do if you can't feel a sense of menuchas hanefesh if bitachon is not doing it for you? Now, why your bitachon is not doing it for you is a very, very individualized question. But one reason could be, Rav Wolbe famously writes that there is nothing that a person fools himself or herself more about than where they're holding in bitachon. Everybody thinks that they're about bitachon until you're in that moment. There's this famous story I love saying over. I read it for the first time in a children's book. It totally blew my mind. Rav Sholem Shvadran Zatzal writes over this story that in the old Yishuv, one time he saw a kid that got hit in the head by some Arab threw a rock at him, hit him in the head, and he grabs this kid and he starts running with him back to the Frum neighborhood, and some woman sees him running with this kid, and she starts calling out to him, "It'll be okay, Hashem will take care of it, everything will be fine." And then as Reb Sholem gets closer, she sees it's her own grandson, and she loses it and starts freaking out. And bitachon doesn't necessarily help us if we're not really holding by it. And it's a lifetime's worth of work. Working at it and getting better at it is not the kind of thing that's going to happen overnight. But if I want to have menuchas hanefesh, am I basically saying that if I don't feel or have that level of bitachon, that I'm going to never be able to feel menuchas hanefesh in my life? I mean, it's hard to imagine, to think that I'm not going to be able to feel that sense of calmness simply because my bitachon is not good enough. I'd almost go so far as to say that can't be right. It just can't be. But it's not only my view. Rav Yaakov Yisrael Lugassi, who's mashpia in Yerushalayim, he has this wonderful, wonderful sefer called Yishuv Hadas. And a lot of the things we're going to talk about tonight come from his sefer. And one of the things that he says, he brings from the Baal HaTanya, he brings from the Chavos Halvavos, a person's ability to control their thoughts is inherent. It's innate. You have an ability to control what you're thinking and how you're feeling. So you have to be able to calm yourself down. Right, by the way, as just a little tip, don't ever tell somebody else to calm down. That never, ever works. But you have to be able to do it for yourself somewhat. So if you don't have that level of bitachon, but you want to feel menuchas hanefesh, what are you supposed to do? So perhaps the problem is our definition of what menuchas hanefesh actually is. We might actually have that wrong. I think if we were to take a poll, right, define menuchas hanefesh, I would guess that most people sitting in this room would say something along the lines of, I don't have any daigus. Nothing to worry about, everything's under control, things at work are fine, things at home are fine, I feel like I'm doing okay in my avodas Hashem, no daigus, everything is fine. But if that's your definition of menuchas hanefesh, and it almost means, by definition, that if things are not fine, that you can't feel menuchas hanefesh. My job can be a little bit crazy at times, and as my family will tell you, when Shabbos starts, as Shabbos is starting to end, that's when the stress starts, because I know I've probably got about 600 emails waiting for me. And so you tell me that I can only feel menuchas hanefesh when I'm in a situation where I don't have to worry about anything, but if things are going on that make me nervous, I can't feel a sense of menuchas hanefesh? That means that I don't have control over my life. So if we're defining menuchas hanefesh as a lack of daiga, you've got a little bit of a problem. You're never actually going to be able to feel that sense of menuchas hanefesh. So what exactly are you supposed to do? If you think about people who are very calm under pressure, like listening to Steve Garr today, right? You think wow, how awesome is that? I wish I had a story like that, where I pulled up and I grabbed my gun from next to me again, running out to, kill some terrorist. I don't have any stories like that. The stories I have are not nearly as exciting. So when I was a very young associate, my office mate I worked at a very, very large law firm, and we were working on what at the time was the single largest corporate restructuring of all time. It's about $8 billion in debt, and the company owned what was then the largest fiber optic network in the world, and we put the company into bankruptcy, and we were selling it. Now this sale, and for some of you in this room, you're going to look at me as I'm saying these words and think like I have no idea what you're talking about, but just trust me on this one. This was something that was highly confidential, and it was not supposed to be known outside of a small circle of the company and its advisors. Now, there were a number of parties, some of the biggest names in finance, that were bidding on this company, a company called Global Crossing. And my office mate, well, she was in charge of sending out to all of the different parties who were interested in bidding a list of bidding requirements. But she made one little mistake. She didn't BCC everybody. She CC'd all of them. The next day, the front page of the New York Times was a list of all of the parties that were interested in bidding. Now, you might imagine my office mate was kind of freaked out by this. Heck, I was freaked out by it, and I had nothing to do with it. What does she do? She walks down the hall to the head of our group, who was, again, I'm not going to bother you or bore you with the details, but just suffice it to say, man was a legend in the world of corporate finance. And she walks into his office with a copy of the New York Times. Back then, it was, people actually had the hard copy print, right? She walks into his office and she shows it to him. He stops. Okay, first, let's make sure they spelled my name right. Second, let's go call the client. No stress, no drama, no anger. Just, don't we all want to be like that, where something crazy happens and we just, okay, what do you do? Chaim Friedlander says, Menuchas Hanefesh has nothing to do with lack of daigus. So the Gemara in Nedarim says that a person is like a city. What does it mean it's like a city? It explains with Chaim Friedlander. A city has a government. Think of New York City, right? You've got the mayor, for how much longer I don't know, and he has all of his various department heads. Department of Education, Department of Energy, the sanitation, police, fire. Every single one of those department heads needs to make sure that they're doing their job. If the head of the Department of Sanitation decides that she's in charge now of, say, the Department of Education, well, you're going to have a problem. Because now she's not doing her job, she's doing something else. And if the head of the police department decides now he's in charge of the Department of Energy, same thing. For the city to work properly, every single aspect of that city has to be using the talents that they have, and they have to stay in their lane. Every human being is given certain koiches, certain talents. If you don't use your talents in the right time and the right place, you're going to feel confusion. But using those talents in the right time, in the right place, doing the job you're supposed to do, that, says Rabbi Chaim Friedlander, that's Menuchas Hanefesh. Said differently, Menuchas Hanefesh is the feeling you get when you see a job in front of you, you know what it is that you're supposed to do, and you do it. And you don't think about anything else, you don't think about what happened previously, you don't think what's going to come of it in the future. You just focus on what it is that's in front of you to do, and you do it. That's Menuchas Hanefesh. The truth is, we probably all know people who have tremendous talents, but were never really matzliach. Because they couldn't actually figure out the right time and the right place as to where it is they're supposed to be doing or what they're supposed to be doing. And they end up basically getting in their own way. But a person who's able to focus on what it is that he or she has in front of them and doesn't worry about anything else. Doesn't worry about what's going to be later, what happened previously, did I get it right last time, will I get it right next time? I don't know. All I know is I have a job in front of me to do right now, and that's all that I'm going to do. That's an incredible feeling of Menuchas Hanefesh. But there's something else that you have to know that goes along with this. Hashem created every single one of us with a job to do. The famous Jewish philosopher Jerry Seinfeld has this great line where he talks about, like, why do people get so excited about birthdays? A big deal. All you did was not die. That's his line. But the truth is, the right way to think about birthdays, this has been attributed to Rabbi Nachman, although I've never actually seen it inside, is your birthday is a day that HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided that the world could no longer exist without you. Because Hashem does not do duplicates. If you exist in this world, it means that there is a job that Hashem wants you to do that only you can do. And that job that you have exists every second of every day. There is something for you to be doing in this life, in your life, that relates to your relationship to Hashem, your avodas Hashem, and the world around you. If you don't appreciate that, you can start to find yourself living in a world where you're just like, okay, now what? Where you're just like, I have nothing to do. Without recognizing that if you're still around, you do have a job. You know, it's like if you ever met somebody who's like much older, like really towards the end of their life, and all they do is they talk about what once was, right? The glory days, what used to happen. But they're making a huge mistake. Because the fact is, they're living in a world now. They still have something they can accomplish, that they can do, that nobody else can do. Now, by the way, listening to people like that explain to you how they used to live in the glory days is actually a huge chesed. Like, totally, I'm serious. You should absolutely do it. And of course, on the flip side, younger people tend to spend their time thinking about what's going to be. And how many times have you had like a thought in your head, I'm going to do, 5 years from now, I'm going to be an accomplished fill in the blank. And 5 years go by, and nothing. Because Menuchas Hanefesh means in this moment that I'm in. Doesn't matter what else is going to happen or what's been. In this moment, Hashem has a job for me. Now, it's not always necessarily so easy to figure out what that job is. And sometimes that can actually be a little bit of a cause of our own problem with a lack of Menuchas HaNefesh, because we don't really know what is it that I'm supposed to be doing in this moment. But if you look at things from the perspective of Hashem gave me a job to do, and living my life is part of that job, and I need to focus on what's in front of me now, not the things that I wish happened, not the things that I hope would happen, not that, hey, I wish I was sitting on a beach somewhere sipping pina coladas, because then I'd have absolutely nothing to worry about. You ever do this, like you come back from vacation and it's like, oh man, that vacation was so great. And when you're going on vacation, it's like, oh man, that vacation is going to be so great. And when you're on vacation, you're spending all the time thinking about what happened when you left the office, what's going to be when you come back. Because you're not even enjoying or taking advantage of the moment that you're in. Your job when you're on vacation, I was going to say is to vacate, but I don't think that's actually the right word. Your job on vacation is to relax. In that moment, your job is to relax. And relaxation, it's going to take different forms for different people. But if you don't realize what it is that you're supposed to be doing, you're never going to find Menuchas HaNefesh. Because we make this mistake and assume that Menuchas HaNefesh and Menuchas HaGuf are the same thing, when in reality, they have nothing to do with each other. In fact, Menuchas HaGuf can cause a lack of Menuchas HaNefesh. You ever lay in bed at night, like terribly worried about what's going to come up at work or something in your life the next day? You're in bed. Right? You should be totally relaxed. You're going to sleep. Yet, your mind is moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour. That Menuchas HaGuf that you're experiencing is causing a lack of Menuchas HaNefesh. When you realize that Menuchas HaNefesh is about focusing on the thing that's in front of me now, on doing the job that I have in front of me now, then you can actually do it. And you can start to experience what Menuchas HaNefesh really feels like, because you're doing the job that you have to do. Now, of course, as I mentioned a second ago, sometimes knowing what the job that we have to do, it can be a little bit hard to figure out. But I think part of the problem that we have is that we make a little bit of a mistake in terms of thinking about what our job in life is. Because again, I think if I were to ask most of us what our job in life is, we would say it has something to do with Avodas Hashem. And that's obviously right. But the problem that we make is, or we create for ourselves, is we don't translate what it means to do your Avodas Hashem into the actuality of what it means to live life day to day. I'll give you an example. So, a friend of mine was learning in Kollel many, many years ago, and he was learning in a halacha Kollel in Yerushalayim, and he comes in for Seder, and he was very excited, working on a certain sugya, whatever it was, and in the middle of Seder, somebody comes in and tells him that, nobody had cell phones back then, so his wife had called the payphone, and comes in and says to him there was some problem in the house, she needed him to come home. And he was very, very frustrated by this, because he's like, I'm in the middle of learning for Seder, like my wife needs me to come home, I'm here. And his Rosh Kollel said to him, you're making a mistake. It's obvious right now that Hashem wants you to go home. You have a certain level of clarity that most of us may not have at any given moment in time in our lives. Obviously, you need to go home. Your Avodas Hashem now, go home, help your wife. The problem we have is that we live our lives thinking that Avodas Hashem has to be our focus, which is true, but we don't realize that how we work on our Avodas Hashem has to be viewed through the lens of what else is going on in our lives at that moment. I'll give you another example. Chaim Friedlander, at the end of his life, was very sick. He was actually in the hospital in New York. And he was experiencing tremendous pain. And he wrote a letter, I believe it was to his son, talking about the types of things that someone like Chaim Friedlander talks about. And he was explaining how hard it was for him, with all the pain he was experiencing, to actually do his usual Seder Hayom and the things that he used to do to work on himself. But then he says to his son, I realized something that I've been missing all these years. I thought of life as the different sort of buckets into which we place the aspects of our life. I have my learning, I have the chesed that I do, I have my relationship with my wife, and my relationship with my kids, and my chavero, and all the things that I do in my life. And then I have this last bucket, which is dealing with challenges. And so everything has to be the same, and I need to deal with the challenges in my life as best as possible, but that can't impact my learning, my chesed, my ben chavero, and so on. Says Chaim Friedlander, that's the wrong way to look at it. You have the things that you do in your life, how things are going at any given moment. That's what Hashem is asking of you. How well are you doing in your learning, for example, when things are going fine? But how well you're doing in your learning when things are not going well, Hashem does not assume or expect that it's going to be the same. He just wants to know, are you still trying? It's like when I was in high school, like the really in thing for those of us who were on the basketball team, it's like in our basketball team in yeshiva and basically a bunch of short Jewish white kids. So we'd always try to come up with different ways to jump higher, right? And of course, none of them ever worked. And one of the things that we did was, this was very in vogue in the late 80s, early 90s. They had these shoes. They had these huge platforms like on the front of the foot, right down here. And you're basically supposed to play in them because you're supposed to be walking on your tippy toes because guys don't wear heels, right? And essentially you're supposed to be running around. That's supposed to make your calf muscles much, much stronger. Okay? I don't know which chacham came up with this idea, but clearly he was a marketing genius because everyone I know bought them, but never worked. But the reality is when you're playing in that sort of environment, you're not going to play the same way as when you're wearing regular shoes. But the idea is, are you trying the same? How are you doing when you're wearing, ankle weights? It's not going to be the same as when you're not. But that doesn't matter. It's not supposed to be. That's not what Hashem's asking of you. Hashem just wants you, in the moment, to do the best job that you can with the abilities that you have in the challenges that He sends you. Because those challenges were tailor-made for you. You want to find Menuchas Hanefesh, you have to get out of this mode of Menuchas Hanefesh is only available to me when nothing's going on, when it's easy, when I'm relaxed, when work's great and the kids are good and everything at home is fine and it's 75 and sunny outside. That's not life. Life doesn't work that way. And if that's what you think Menuchas Hanefesh is, you're never going to find it. Because you're going to spend your entire life chasing a dream and missing out on the feelings you can get, the feelings of accomplishment, the awesome feelings you can get by living a life of focusing on what it is that's in front of you. And those mistaken definitions totally mess us up. You see a very, very similar idea when it comes to just general happiness. Right? You ever hear this line, right? Happiness is a choice. You've heard this before? Right? The first time I heard this, I was like, oh, that's fantastic. I didn't realize it was a choice. Now that I know it's a choice, I'm only going to choose happiness. That lasted for about an hour. Like, what do you mean? I'm trying to choose happiness. Why am I not feeling happy? Well, maybe the problem is I don't really know what happiness is. So my son's Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Yitzchak Selnick, loves telling over this Maisa that a bacher that he knew was suffering from whatever it was, challenges he was going through and having a hard time feeling simcha. So his Rosh Yeshiva, I think it was Rabbi Meir Stern, told him, there's an Alter Yid in Lawrence named Rabbi Naiman. He learned in Brisk, by the Brisker Rav. Go talk to him. Okay. This kid goes and he talks to, sits with Rabbi Naiman, and he starts asking about, what things that happened in Brisk. And Rabbi Naiman says to him, and I'm a third generation American, so I'm going to say this in English, because if I said it in Yiddish, none of us would understand it. So he says to Rabbi Naiman, in Brisk, what was it like? So Rabbi Naiman says to him, Brisk, very, very focused on simcha. And this kid looks at I don't know. I don't think of Brisk as like the paradigm of what simcha is. You want to talk Breslov, maybe. I don't think of Brisk as simcha. Rabbi Naiman looks at him and says, oh, you're talking about hoilulus. I'm talking about simcha. We make this mistake. Simcha to us often means like a party. Right? Like Mishnah Nichnas Adar Marvin B'Simcha. Okay, be happy. But what if I'm not feeling happy? What if I don't have a party to go to? Or what if there's a party to go to and I'm just not feeling it? So I can't feel happy because I can't have this environment around me that's creating happiness? I mean, it doesn't really make any sense. Or here's I'm actually afraid to do this actually live. We'll see if this works. Okay, so I'm going to give everyone a choice. I could wave a magic wand. You can have one of two things. I can either give you $5 billion, or I can guarantee that you'll be happy the rest of your life, but you'll be poor. Anyone? Okay, don't answer. It's okay. When I do this in with secular crowds, right, everyone puts up their hand and says they want the $5 billion. Why? Because they say, well, Josh, if you give me happiness, I'll be happy, but I'll be poor. Give me $5 billion, I'll be happy and I'll be rich. Without realizing that $5 billion is highly unlikely to actually make you happy. Because if you don't know what happiness actually is, you're never going to achieve it. So, of all places to go for a definition of happiness, the Piazetzner Rebbe, who was a Rebbe in the Warsaw Ghetto, and again, just to give you some idea of what he went through, one of his early Mamarim, the way he gave over his story, how the Eish Kodesh got printed in and of itself is a nes nigla in terms of how they found it. But he'd speak by Shalosh Shudas, and then they'd write it down, let's say Shabbos. So one year, he was talking about the concept of what it means to have happiness. And he says to his Hasidim, by the way, you talk to me about being happiness thinking we're suffering so much. You think we suffered more than anyone else in Jewish history? Is what he writes. 2 years later, he says over the same mimer, and in the Eish Kodesh on the bottom there's a footnote, I take back what I said, nobody suffered the way that we have. Just to give a sense of how much suffering they went through in the Warsaw Ghetto. But the Piazetzner Rebbe, of all people, has a definition of happiness. His happiness is the pleasure you feel from the process of growth. The work that you put in to try and make yourself better gives you a pleasure that is unmatched in this world. That's happiness. Happiness is not something I happen to get, the new pair of shoes, a new bottle of wine. Happiness is not even friendships or relationships. True happiness only comes from the work that you do to make yourself a better person. Not that you accomplish it, not that you succeed, but that you put in the work to make yourself a better person. Think for a second about how you feel after you control your temper, go to the gym, do a favor for somebody you can't stand, maybe spend a little extra time learning, a little extra time saying Tehillim. Think about the pleasure that you get. Beforehand, no interest. I want it, I'm not sure, not for me. But then you do it. That pleasure that you feel, that's happiness. Recognizing that your ability to be happy, it is a choice. Because it's the choice that comes from deciding, I'm not going to take it easy. See, the thing is, we live in a world where everything around us, whether we realize it or not, is us being bombarded with the message, easier is better. Flip through any one of the Frum magazines and read the ads, right? Just look at them. You'll see every single one, another Pesach program, another type of food you've never had before, you didn't even know you realized you needed, another restaurant. And look, everyone needs to make money. I'm not trying to harp on them. But the fact of the matter is, we don't even realize how much we are bombarded with this message that easier is better. You want to be happy? You need it to be easier. But the technology that we use in our lives, that has become so much a part of our lives, is all about making things easier. So naturally, whether we realize it or not, if we don't stop and focus and change our mindset, we're never going to be able to find happiness, because happiness requires doing the work. Purim's coming up on Friday, right? So one of the things that I've found over the years, this is probably more true for the men in the room than for the women, is that people guys look forward to Purim like crazy. I know women hate it because the Shalach Mana stuff is crazy, right? But guys look forward to Purim because to them it's like the opportunity to feel a sense of real simcha. But try this, or don't try this at home, especially if you're married. Don't try this with your husband, it's a bad idea. Ask a guy the day after Purim how he feels. 2 days after Purim how he feels. That simcha that you had, where is it? What did it do for you? Simcha, are you kidding me? It's gone. Like, I'm still getting over my headache from my hangover. Simcha? I don't have simcha anymore. What do you mean? What was the point of going through Purim if you don't have some simcha that you can take with you? But the problem is, our definition of simcha is totally messed up. It's just a question of what party am I going to next? Whose suit am I going to stop by? Which Rav am I going to go to? And not realizing that the work of Purim is real work. You want to tap into that simcha? You need to realize what it is in your life that you don't like to do and figure out a way to do it. Figure out a way to work harder. I didn't say happiness is fun, because the truth is, it's not about fun. Real happiness brings with it that Menuchas Hanefesh that we are all so desperately searching for, the thing that we want in our lives more than anything. Because I'll tell you something, no matter what you have going on in your life, and every single person in this room without a doubt has something going on in their life. That's life. But if you want to make that life whatever your own pekala is, if you want to make it not just tolerable, but enjoyable, live life where you're not looking forward to the next vacation because the only thing you can imagine, and you're not going through the week just saying, okay, when's the weekend going to come so I don't have to worry about whatever it is that's bothering me. But I want to live life where every day I'm happy. And that means making sure that I know I have to put in the work. Because without doing that, it's just going to be an elusive dream that you spend your entire life chasing. And for every single one of us, and with this I'm going to end, Mishenichnas Adar Marvin B'Simcha. We're living in the month of Simcha. Now is the time to make that decision, to choose that I want more happiness in my life. And that means, very practical, think about something in your life that you want to be better. Don't go crazy. Something small. Something you want to be better, and think of a way that you're going to work at it. It can be anything. I mean, the options are literally limitless. But now is the time. If you want to find that Menuchas Hanefesh in your life, you want to find that Simcha, you have to find that one thing to start with that I don't have because I'm not working at it. Because instead, I try to take it easy. I don't work so hard. And when you have that choice and you decide, I'm going to work at it a little bit more, that's when you'll see the rest of your life is going to start to feel different. Because every area of your life, you're going to find opportunities for Menuchas Hanefesh. Okay, take a deep breath. What's in front of me now? What's the job I have to do? What do I need to work at to make my life a little bit better? And with that, I give a bracha to all of us that this Adar and this Purim will all experience a true simcha in our life that we can carry with us the rest of the year. Tzvach.